Today we need to make this Lexus perfect, and I know there's no such thing as perfect. Nothing's ever perfect. But if you want a really nice base coat finish, then you definitely want to pay attention to this video. I'll walk you through the entire process of applying a high metallic base coat finish and how you can get the best results possible. I'll give you all the tips and tricks I use, so let's dig in and get started. Last episode we started on this Lexus, which was in beautiful condition, but it had some minor chips and scratches and a few small dings that we needed to take care of. We did those repairs and then we painted the deck lid and the quarter panels and the rear bumper cover. If you want to check out that video, I'm going to leave a card at the top of this page. This OEM bumper has already been prepped out for sealer. If you want to know that entire process, I have a video that I just created on my channel. You can check that out. But before we apply sealer or base coat, we want to have everything sanded with a 600 to 800 grit scratch. So we use an orbital sander to machine sand everything out smooth with 600 to 800. Any tight areas or hard to reach areas, we used a gray scuff pad. We also use those on the body lines because you don't want to use your DA on any body lines because you want to eliminate any burn throughs in your paint or clear. While I'm thinking about it, I do want to let you guys know, for anybody interested, I have created a PDF file on this entire video that walks you through the entire process step by step. I think this might be a useful tool for you to just be able to go back and reference what was said in this video and follow that process step by step. Let me know your thoughts about that in the comment. It is on my Shopify store, which is garagennoisegear.com, and I'll put a link in the description. It is $1.99. That just helps support the channel. So let me know if that's something you want to see. If you want me to create more of those, I will. Let me know down in the comments below. And if you do purchase one, let me know your thoughts on it. Here I'm mixing up the sealer. The sealer I use is U-POL 2253. That's a 4:1 2K urethane primer that can also be used as a sealer. 4:1 mixing ratio is a high build primer. 4:1 is a primer surfacer, which is a thinner primer, and then 4:1 to 2 parts urethane reducer. Then you can use it as a sealer, and it's a catalyzed sealer, so this is a good product to use. There are a lot of different products out there to use as a sealer. Check your technical data sheets whenever you're mixing it up. So we'll be sealing the bumper cover and all the repair areas that we did on the hood. So anywhere we put primer, we're going to seal those. And what sealer is going to do, it's going to create a uniform surface, and it also prevents differences in absorption between primer, body filler, and the existing paint. It's also going to improve adhesion and help the base coat bond properly. It also helps prevent some of those fine sanding scratches from showing through. So it's really essential for like metallics, which highlight those surface imperfections. But if you're a DIYer, it's not always necessary. And we're going to talk about why that is later on. And we're going to talk about some things you want to do after you seal it before you apply your base. Right now, I'm going to go ahead and wipe down this bumper. We're using isopropyl alcohol to get it clean and make sure it's dust-free before we start applying that sealer. Now, we're also going to have to apply an adhesion promoter over this. Now, what that adhesion promoter is going to do is it's going to soften up that plastic just a bit to help that sealer adhere properly and get a good bite in that plastic so you have good adhesion and you don't have any issues with peeling. The adhesion promoter I'm using today is the U-POL number 4 grip. I also tend to use Bulldog in aerosol cans as well. That's a good brand. You can also get sprayable adhesion promoter that you can purchase. I do prefer to use the sprayable that you can spray out of a regular spray gun, but this is what I had on hand, so this is what we're going to do today. And remember, all the products that I use in this video, I'm going to link down below in the description, and you can check those out if you're interested. Now, we're going to use the InoKraft Drizzle D1 low volume, low pressure paint gun to apply our sealer and our base coat. Now, our gun settings for sealer and base coat are going to be 2.5 to 3 turns out on the fluid volume. So we'll close it all the way, turn it 2.5 to 3 turns out. We'll open up our fan pattern wide open. Make sure you do a test spray to make sure you have a nice even fan pattern. We're also going to have our air pressure between 15 and 20 PSI or 25 PSI, somewhere in there. Now, the first coat of sealer, we want to apply a light to medium coat. We want to spray it evenly across this entire bumper cover and the repair areas. We'll apply 2 coats of sealer, allowing a flash time of 15 to 20 minutes in between coats. While the first coat of sealer is drying on the bumper cover, we're going to go ahead and seal the repair areas on this hood. Now we're just sealing those primer repair areas, kind of going to connect the dots. Now sealer is great in certain situations, but as a DIYer, if you're painting out of your garage without a booth, it does allow another opportunity for trash or debris to get in your paint job, get trapped in your sealer, and then show up in your finished product. But after we get done applying this second coat of sealer, we'll let this flash off for about 15 minutes and we'll take one extra step to make sure we have clean sealer before we apply our base coat. Anytime you're spraying raw plastic, you definitely want to use a sealer, and it's much more important when you're spraying these high metallic finishes. So don't get trapped into thinking you don't need a sealer on raw plastic. You definitely need sealer on raw plastic. Now, if you already got a painted bumper and you're just reconditioning a used bumper and you're painting over an existing paint, you probably don't need a sealer. So keep that in mind when you're repairing your vehicle. Your sealer should be applied nice and smooth. The smoother your sealer, the smoother your base coat, and then the smoother your clear coat. And that's going to give you better results. Now, here we're just letting the sealer flash off. We need to let it mostly dry because we're going to inspect this for any dust particles that have landed on the surface and stuck in that sealer. If we have some dust particles like we do here, I'm going to take a piece of 600 grit sandpaper and I'm just going to lightly nib that debris out and remove it. We'll sand it lightly, remove that debris, and then I'll wipe it down with a tack cloth to remove any dust. This is kind of the secret sauce to getting a really clean paint job when you're spraying sealer and you're a DIYer spraying with no booth. So I do this after I seal it, but after we apply the base, we're going to re-inspect it and make sure it's still clean. And if it's not, we'll smooth out that debris as well before we apply another coat of base. We're going to soften the edge of this sealer with this gray scuff pad. We are going to use a color blender on this, so I'm going to go over this whole hood with a color blender, but I'm going to knock down any overspray just lightly with this scuff pad. This is going to help give us a smooth base coat, especially on these high metallics. These high metallics, you know, those metallics will sit funny on the edge of a sealer. So you want to do anything you can to smooth that out. See, I can still feel it right there. That's much better. Something else you can do is after you spray your sealer, like on this hood, you can use a color blender. I use the U-Pol number 9. It comes in an aerosol can, and you just spray the edge of that sealer. It'll kind of soften that edge, so when you go to spray your base, you don't have any mottling or any distortion in your metallic when you lay down your base. Now we're tacking this off and getting it prepared for our wet bed. Now, what a wet bed is, it's a clear base coat. So it's a base coat that doesn't have any pigments in it or color. And what this is going to do, it's going to prevent dry spray, slow down the drying process, and allow those metallics to lay down evenly. That'll create a uniform surface. It reduces absorption into that substrate. So it's going to minimize mottling and striping and ensure that even metallic distribution, so you have a nice, smooth, uniform base coat. It also fills some of those minor scratches that can really affect those metallics. A wet bed can also be referred to as a color blender or a clear base coat. The product we use is a speedcoat color blender. Now you reduce that about 10%. It comes pretty thick. You can spray it right out of the can, but I like to reduce mine about 10%. That thins it out just a little bit, so it helps it spray out just a little bit smoother. The way you spray this color blender is just like base coat. You're going to spray on one medium to wet coat over the entire panel. Now, we're not going to do it over the bumper cover. I don't think it's really necessary over the bumper cover, but definitely on this hood and sides, we want to put a wet bed on it. Then we're going to let it flash off for about 2 minutes. You don't really want to let it flash off till it's completely dry. You want it to still be wet when you apply your base coat. So it should be tacky, but not completely dry. And then as far as spraying it on, you spray it on just like base coat. You overlap your passes 70 to 80%. You want to have a consistent speed and a consistent distance from the panel, and you want to apply it as smooth as possible. We previously mixed up the base coat. Now there's a few things to remember when you're mixing up this high metallic base. You want to make sure it's stirred thoroughly. Sometimes these metallics, they cling together on the bottom, so you want to make sure that's stirred thoroughly. If you have a filter on your disposable cup, that's that's great, but you may want to run it through a strainer as well. That way, if you have any metallics that aren't stirred up properly, they will get filtered out. And then, of course, follow the manufacturer recommendations for a reduction of your paint. This Nason paint reduces 2 to 1. This is the Nason XL, and it reduces 2 parts paint, 1 part urethane reducer. All right, now let's set up our gun for base coat. We are going to use the InoKraft Drizzle D1 low volume, low pressure paint gun for base. I really like the way this gun sprays base. It's going to use a lot less materials too. So if you're interested in this gun, check it out. I'll leave a link in the description. We are going to use the sagola for clear coat, but that's going to be next week, and we'll do a whole nother video on that. And I'll also create a PDF file on how to spray clear coat. That's going to be an in-depth video, so don't miss that one. And definitely make sure you're subscribed and your notifications are turned on. Now, as far as the setup on the gun for a base coat, we're going to use between 15 and 22 PSI for this particular gun. If you're using a different gun, that pressure may be different. As far as the fluid volume, 2 to 3 turns out from close. So we close that fluid volume all the way, and then we open up 2 to 3 turns out. Now we're going to have our fan pattern wide open. You definitely want to do a test spray and make sure your pattern is even all the way through. If it's not, you might need to dial that fan pattern a little bit smaller. The other thing you want to make sure of is that your gun is thoroughly clean. That means that cap is clean. There's no debris in there that's going to affect your spray pattern, because that's going to affect how these metallics lay down, and you want them to lay down nice and uniform. Now, I like to take my cap off and I like to hold it up to the light and look through it. You can see if there's any little bit of debris that's hung up in those passages, so you can get those cleaned out and have a nice uniform spray pattern. When applying your base coat, what I typically do is I'll cover my primer first. I want to make sure that's covered. Put one good coat on there. We're going to put it on medium wet. We're blending this hood. So we're going to cover the primer first, and then we're going to blend out into the rest of the panel. But your first coat should be a medium, even coat with 70 to 80% overlap on your passes. So that means you make a pass, you overlap that pass 70 to 80%. You're probably going to want to apply 2 to 3 more light coats, allowing the proper flash time of 5 to 10 minutes in between coats. As a general rule, you want to be 5 to 7 inches away from the panel. And like I said, our gun pressure is going to be between 15 and 22 to 25 PSI, depending on the gun. That's with the trigger pulled as well. Get one coat on here. Okay, we got our first coat on this bumper cover, a nice solid coat. It's nice and smooth. We're going to inspect it now for any particles of dust. We've let it flash off for about 15 minutes, and we're looking over it for any dust particles. Remember, this is going to give you a much cleaner paint job. So if we see any dust particles, we will nib those out with a little bit of 600 grit sandpaper. You could also use 1000. Sand those out smooth, and then we'll be ready to apply another coat of base, and that'll prepare us for our clear coat. Off camera, I went ahead and put a couple more coats of color on this bumper cover, and then we blended it out into the hood. We put a couple more coats on the hood, and we blended it out into the hood. But now it's time for our final process, which is the drop coat. Now, you could put a wet bed on before you do your final drop coat. I didn't do that here, but that is an option. So you could use your color blender, put a good coat over the entire panel, and then do your drop coat over top of that. That can help in getting a nice uniform metallic finish. So when you do a drop coat, though, you want to lower your air pressure probably to about anywhere from 15 to 18 PSI. So you're going to have a softer spray. You're going to increase the gun distance from 5 to 7 inches away to about 8 to 10 inches away from the panel. You want to apply your drop coat in a crisscross pattern. Mist a light even coat in alternating directions for a uniform metallic distribution. This is going to help smooth those metallics out, make them look nice and uniform. But keep that gun moving smoothly. Avoid stopping or hesitating to prevent striping and mottling. And then you want to do a final check before clear coat. Look for any striping. If you see any striping or mottling, you can go back and apply another drop coat. The only thing you want to be concerned about is you don't want it to get too dry. You still want to put it on wet, but you want to put it on as a drop coat. The last thing you want to do is inspect your finish. Make sure all the metallics are uniform. You can use a Sunlight such as an Astro, or they even sell one at Harbor Freight. If you do see a little bit of mottling, sometimes it's tricky to tell, but if you do see a little bit of mottling, you can always put another drop coat on. Just you want to avoid putting it on dry because that's going to cause sand piling, which is a roughness in your surface, and that's going to create an issue. So make sure you put on enough paint in a drop coat to make it nice and smooth. If you found all this information helpful, definitely give me a like and subscribe to the channel. And remember, we do have the PDF file if you want this in a PDF file form, and you can use as a reference. So check that out at garagenoisegear.com. Don't miss next week's episode when we go over clear coat. I'm going to walk you through the entire process. I am going to create a PDF file for that one as well. There's going to be a lot of information in that video. So definitely check it out, and we'll see you on the next episode of Garage Noise.